All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Little by little, people continue to join the virtual room. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Maritza. Let's see these slides. My name is Maritza Bandera. I am the project manager for Healing Illinois. Again, we're very excited about this initiative. We've officially kicked it off. The application portal is open. The team will be sharing a couple of polls in a little bit, just so that we know like who's in the room, who's joining us, how did you hear about Healing Illinois? So please, as I run through these initial slides, just the basic information about Healing Illinois, please answer those questions so we know who's in the room. So the agenda for today, what we'll cover. So today's session is really meant to answer any questions, clarification, points of clarification also that you might have about Healing Illinois. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Healing Illinois. I'll talk about the funding priorities, the evaluation criteria. So how are we going to evaluate the proposals? I'm going to talk about intermediaries, eligibility, grant terms, and the application process. We'll have time for a question and answer at the end. So feel free to put your questions in the chat. And also, that's when we'll continue, we'll monitor the chat, and then we'll answer the questions when we get to the Q&A portion. So please bear with us as we get through this information, and there's a nice amount of people in the virtual room. So just a couple of reminders, just this is a safe space for sharing information, thoughts and ideas. We'll welcome your questions and feedback, but please hold them to the end, as I just mentioned. So just a little bit about Healing Illinois. What is Healing Illinois? This was an initiative that was launched almost about 3 years ago by the Illinois Department of Human Services. At the time, the Chicago Community Trust served as a partner to launch this initiative. Fast forward to 2023, we have renewed commitment by IDHS and the state and the governor. And this time around, the partner to distribute funding is the Fields Foundation of Illinois. So Healing Illinois is designed to distribute $4.5 million in grants to organizations across the state of Illinois to begin or continue the work of racial healing. The ultimate long-term vision of Healing Illinois is to make Illinois an anti-racist state. That's the ultimate long-term goal. But our intended outcomes are that in order to do that, we need to create the conditions to build knowledge and understanding of racial healing and equity in communities across the state, strengthen trust and relationship building among community residents, expand opportunities for communities and individuals to begin to heal from the harms caused by racism, and increase awareness in media engagement focused on racial healing and equity. Some of the funding priorities, very similarly to what was funded 3 years ago, but a little bit different. And here's where some variances, hopefully, that you'll notice. So the 4 main priorities are racial healing sustainability. So these are activities designed to build community through knowledge sharing, deeper interpersonal interactions, and intentional spaces for collective healing. So the sustainability component is really designed to support existing racial healing activities, new ones as well, but we're really thinking about the sustainability of existing efforts, right? The next funding priority is what we call narrative change. So this is really designed for awareness building of racial healing and justice work to facilitate engagement, leadership, and activation of residents most impacted by residents. So narrative change is really the hearts and minds work, is really like, how do we shape the narrative as we think about healing and justice and equity work? Education and training. We want to be able to support knowledge and understanding of racial healing and justice via trainings such on anti-racism, racial equity, racial justice, etc., on different topics that we know this is an opportunity for organizations to apply for funding to provide just increasing knowledge of their internally of their staff or just externally of their stakeholders. And then the last one, this is the one that the team has been excited about, because this is a new funding priority this year, is on racial healing readiness. So we want to, so this is really capacity building support. So we want to develop the capacity and early stage ideas that may lead to new programming and projects with long-term vision to advance racial healing. So we know that there might be organizations that want to embark in this work of racial healing and racial equity, but sometimes in order to do that work, there's pre-work that is needed, right? Whether it's research or town hall meetings, or just talking with your stakeholders in order to assess like what is the type of programming that would be relevant, that would make sense for our stakeholders. There's some of that pre-work that is needed, and this is what that funding priority is exactly designed to fund and support that. So now I'm going to give you some examples of types of activities that fall under each category. So under racial healing sustainability, we want to fund projects that build deeper interpersonal interactions through racial healing circles, peace circles, restorative justice practices, and many other tools and practices that fall under the umbrella of racial healing. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this is expansion of existing racial healing programs. This is where we want to think about how do we fund the creative arts space as well. So artistic activities that include community-wide murals, visual artistic events, exhibitions, storytelling, and discussions that advance racial healing. We do want to also fund leadership development initiatives for racial healing practitioners, organizers, and leaders of color in relation to racial healing, power building, and community advocacy. So again, this is really designed to support existing and new, again, but really we want to think about the sustainability of healing work. Narrative change. So this, what might be some types of activities that fall under this funding priority. So that would be workshops, right? Workshops to teach community members how to share their personal stories, to activate others for systemic change, right? We want to amplify truth narratives of communities impacted by systemic racism, storytelling programs to build understanding and empathy. So this is really about, the stories that we tell, how do we still tell stories, but really, really the outcome of this is, can we build understanding and empathy and understanding of each other, of people that come from different backgrounds, from different walks of life. The third category, as I mentioned earlier, was education and training. So what might fall under this? So this is really increasing knowledge and understanding of racial healing justice. So again, this is focused on workshops and anti-racism, racial equity, racial justice, and anything that falls under a training, individuals that would learn something new, that will learn different tools to to make their work better, to include healing practices, any those types of activities will fall under education and training. And then the last component, as I mentioned, is the racial healing readiness. So this might look like community consultation, identification of issues and research, assessment or feasibility studies for expanding programs and projects, increasing group or organizational capacity through specific skills training or new tools. So hopefully this gives you a sense of the types of activities that fall under each of the funding priorities. Again, it's not inclusive. We just are giving you a sense of what are the types of activities that are fundable, but you might have proposed other types of activities that fall under that funding priority, and we welcome those. So this is not an exhaustive list, but did want to plant the seeds of to give you a sense of what we might be funding. And then evaluation criteria. You might be curious about how do we anticipate evaluating all of your proposals. So the first one, alignment, right? We want to make sure that the proposed project is corresponding to the activities, right? To the funding priorities, and that it is in alignment with that. Organizational capacity, right? The capacity of the organization and its staff to develop and implement the proposed project within the scope and time frame. And then we'll talk about time frame in a little bit. And then the scope of the project, right? The proposed activities and budget are in alignment with the overall time frame of Healing Illinois. So those are the three main areas of how we will evaluate your proposals. intermediaries. So with Healing Illinois, we are following IDHS regional maps, right? That the state is divided into 5 regions. For regions, for regions 3, 4, and 5, which basically includes the middle all the way to the southernmost part of the state, we will be partnering with intermediaries. Sorry, I said regions 3 to 5. That would be regions 2 to 5. So that would include the northern part of the state to basically region 2, 3, 4, and 5. We will be partnering with intermediaries to distribute funding throughout the state. We are not having an intermediary for Chicago because there is an overabundance of GATA certified organizations in Chicago. So the need for an intermediary is not there. And Field Foundation is a funder primarily in Chicago and outside, so in the Cook region. So we don't anticipate having challenges reaching organizations to apply for funding. In Region 2, also, there's a lot of organizations that are GATA certified in Region 2 as well. So we know that we are not going to have challenges of getting applicants for Regions 1 and 2. Region 2, for the most part, is the northernmost part of the state. Now, for the remainder of the state, it gets a little bit trickier because there's not as many organizations that are GATA certified. I'll talk about the GATA certification in a little bit. There's not as many organizations that are GATA certified. So we want to make sure that we are connecting with local funders in the area that can help distribute funding to their networks of organizations and nonprofits. We are in the process of getting the intermediaries identified and selected, and we will be releasing that information very soon. As we identify them, as we onboard the intermediaries, we will share that information. The intermediaries, and not to add to confuse people, they're going to be in a little bit of a different timeline for funding, right? So you have probably seen, if you've read the RFP, you will see that we are accepting proposals on a rolling basis through December 1st with a handful of review deadlines. That does not mean that you have, example, the first review deadline is on October 20th. That does not mean that you have to submit by the 20th. That's just that we will review the first batch of applications that are in the portal by then, right? And so on and so forth. But the ultimate review date will be December 1st. And we'll talk a little bit more about that timeline, but just also wanted to add that in case there's any concerns of, deadlines and review deadlines that come, are in a couple of weeks, and we still don't have intermediaries identified. We want to make sure that we let you know that the intermediaries just will be in a little bit of a different timeline and cycle. And they'll share that information as we develop that process for them as well. So that's a little bit just about intermediaries. We want to be very transparent and that we will be partnering with other funders and throughout the state to distribute funding to organizations that are not in our reach per se. Just a little bit about eligibility. So who is eligible to apply for funding for Healing Illinois? So any public nonprofit, public or private nonprofit community-based organization, that's a 501c3. But this is inclusive of units of local government, public school districts, as an example, that are in good standing with the Illinois Secretary of State. So this is where the GATA certification piece comes into play. Applicants must be GATA certified. If an organization is interested in applying for Healing Illinois and they are not GATA certified, the advice we've been giving organizations and that we provided a couple of years ago was to partner with an organization in your network that is GATA certified. The GATA certification process is not, it's a little bit, there's steps to it. It's a little bit, it might be a little bit cumbersome, but it's not as scary as people might think. We will be providing some TA support for organizations that want to become GATA certified. What I will say, however, this is for next year, or just organizations should have the GATA certification, because then you've already taken a step that if you want to seek state funding, you can, right? So you've already like overcome a barrier that we know that that's been a barrier for some organizations, is getting the GATA certification. If you begin the application process now for to become GATA certified, you might be thinking, do I have enough time to meet the December 1st deadline? You may not, because there's no, it's hard to tell like how long the process may go. It can take up to a month, it could take up to 2 months. So that's why we are saying at the time that you submit your application, the organization must be GATA certified. So I'll leave it at that, because there's no telling whether, if you apply and your GATA certification is in process, you might be thinking, well, I already applied, it's in process. There's no telling. I cannot guarantee. I also, like, I'm not with the state, right? I'm not an employee of IDHS, but we cannot guarantee that your GATA certification will be approved by December 1st. So there's no telling, right? So we just want to be very clear and transparent about that, but we do want to provide more information to organizations about what that GATA certification process looks like. So we'll be working on that to share that as an added resource for the future. Or like I said, it's just something, that certification is something just good to have, because you can seek state funding from that. So then just about grant terms, right? So this is where the timeline comes into play. Grant funds have to be expended by June 30th of 2024. We know it's a tight timeline. It's in alignment with the state's budget, and that's where that deadline comes from. So we say this up front because we want organizations, as you apply for funding, to just be very thoughtful and honest with yourself. Will you be able to spend the funds by June 30th, right? And that's just there's no negotiating that deadline, right? So again, just funds have to be spent by June 30th of next year. Organizations, GATA certified organizations, may apply for up to $30,000 in funding. So the cap is 30. We will consider, so this is something that we added as well. We will consider larger grant requests for collaborative projects involving a network or a coalition of organizations, because we want also organizations to collaborate, obviously, if it makes sense for them. If this is an approach that organizations want to take, then we ask that you have a conversation with myself, or have a conversation with someone from the Healing Illinois team before we say, yes, go ahead and apply. What we don't want is organizations to apply for a larger grant and no conversations were had with us. Of course, you'll still go through the competitive process. We're not, there's no guarantee that you'll get the funding, you'll go through the process, but we do, we just ask that you reach out to the team, and we'll share that email and information in a little bit. But just, we wanted to be transparent about that. What does the application process look like? It's pretty straightforward. So hopefully, like I said, you've had a chance to look at the RFP. Applications must be completed in Field Foundation's grant portal. Also, I should have said this earlier, I'll share these slides so you have them with you, but a lot of the information here is on the RFP as well. You'll be able to access the application, like I said, on Field Foundation's portal. If you're an existing grant recipient of Field Foundation, then you already have an account and you'll be able to log in and see Healing Illinois listed as a funding opportunity. If you're not an existing grant recipient of Field Foundation, you'll have to create an account. Once you if you were to click on that link as an example, it'll take you to the main page, and then you'll just follow the steps of how to create your account. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be accepting proposals on a rolling basis until December 1st. The deadline is 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. The review deadlines, the first one is coming up on October 20th. The next one is November 10th. And the last review, again, is December 1st. and you know, that you might, you know, there might be someone in the room that might be thinking, is there a difference? Are you better off applying by October 20th or December or November 10th? Or, you know, the process is going to be the same. You know, it's because we're accepting them on a rolling basis. Obviously, the sooner you apply, the better. But, you know, we might get some, you know, by next week, by the October 20th deadline, sorry. We may probably see the majority by November, or the final deadline, which is December 1st. So just, you know, just keep that in mind. They're just the review deadline, so that we can, if there's some that we can, you know, begin to review now, then we'll be doing that. Let's see. And that's it. We can open it up. Let me look at this, like Q&A. And then we can open it up for questions now. Let's see. Let's see, team.
Hi, I had a question.
Uh-huh.
So I'm curious, how long do you think approximately it will take to fill out this application? Like, how intensive is it?
It's not very intensive. It's pretty straightforward. It's the typical questions of the who, what, when, where, how, and why, right? Like, why is your organization, why do you want to propose this project? How is your organization ready for this? You know, what are you proposing to do? Who are you going to engage with? So we ask some very basic questions also on just demographics, right? Like, you know, about your organization, your staff, but it's not very intensive, as your typical probably funder application, because it's $30,000, right? So it's not a lot of money, but it's enough that we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions. So it's hard for me to tell you it's an hour, because it just depends on your experience in writing proposals. Some people it might take an hour, some might take two. So it's not, we just ask the most basic questions. We're not asking questions that we know we're probably not going to look at, or that are not going to help inform our decision process. So hopefully that's helpful.
All right, and then is there anything that we cannot, like ineligible expenses or things that we cannot include in our budget? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. We can, so what we'll do is that I will, because it's a little bit of an exhaustive list to an extent. So we use the same language that the state uses of, like, is it reasonable and necessary, right? So as you think about the budgets that you put together or the budget that you put together for your proposal, just think about it. Is it reasonable and necessary for you to execute on the project? So we'll add that information on the Healing Illinois website under the Q&A section, just to provide a little bit of more guidance about what's eligible and what isn't. And then I can begin to go down this list of questions here. So it says, like, will Chicago area applicants need to match Field Foundation's guidelines in terms of mission and geography, or is the criteria separate? It is separate. So the criteria that we laid out for Healing Illinois is a criteria that you need to follow. So there's the funding priorities. As we know, Field Foundation, as an example, right? They primarily fund in Chicago and primarily in Chicago and in the South and West sides. Healing Illinois is a statewide initiative. So this is open to everybody and any nonprofit that's doing work in Illinois, as long as, again, the proposal that they are putting forth is in alignment with the priorities that we have set. And of course, if the organization is a 501c3 and a GATA certified. So those things are still true, but hopefully that helps answer your question, Alexandra. Jillian, so I see your question about if you're a certified organization, can you still apply for regions 2 to 5? I would say yes, go ahead and apply. Since we're still in the process of identifying the intermediaries, you can go ahead and apply directly to Field Foundation. However, you cannot apply directly to Field and then think that you can go, I'm not saying you in particular, but an organization cannot then go ahead and apply to the intermediary directly, right? So you can only apply once. So either you do it through Field, or you have to do it through, or you do it through the intermediary. But because we're still identifying the intermediaries, you can go ahead and apply through Field Foundation directly if you are ready to do so. And then what we would do on our end, we would just share the list with the intermediaries in that respective region to say, these are the organizations in your region that have already been funded directly through us. I saw a question about training, Eleanor. Yes, the education and training can be internal. It does not have to be external. So you might think that you want to provide a series of workshops on, I'm just making it up, on bias, right? Or on a DEI as an example, right? Like there might just be workshops that you want to provide internally for your staff that would be eligible for funding. Yes, so it can be internal or external. Do we fund administrative costs for example, a project coordinator? There can be, yes. I think as long as they're reasonable and necessary for you to execute your project, just remember that the funds have to be expended by June 30th. So keeping that in mind, yes, it can be covered, but just keep those three things in mind. Is it reasonable and necessary for your project? And funds have to be expended by June 30th. Alicia, yes. So we will make funding decisions. The funding decisions are, let me go back to that slide. So the first funding decision is on October 20th. Then it is November 10th and December 1st. So yes, we will notify you. We will notify you whether you have been approved for funding or not 10 days after that review deadline. And what we are saying is organizations will have their funding by December. If we can get it to you sooner, then we will, but definitely by December, organizations will that have been approved for funding will have money in hand. But obviously, if you are part of that first October review cycle, we want to let you know soon, like, yes, we've approved you for funding, you'll get the money in December. Again, if we can get it out to organizations sooner, then we will. Does Healing Illinois have expectations regarding measures of project success and impact? We do, and we'll be sharing some of that. We do ask some of, what are the intended outcomes for your project? So we want organizations to provide that to us. Again, we will be providing also one of the technical assistance sessions is on evaluation and impact, right? So we want to be able to provide that resource to organizations as well about how are you measuring that? How are you tracking that? So that then you can report on your final report to Field Foundation, which helps us, the Field Foundation, submitting our final report to IDHS on the impact of the work and the project. Let's see. Harriet, is there a way I can check if my organization is GATA certified? There is a link that I don't have offhand, but we'll put it in the Q&A on the website. With if you click on that link, you can enter the name of an organization, and then you can see if it's GATA certified. If you're not successful in an October submission, can an organization submit again in November? It would be if you're proposing like a different project, but if, let's say, if you submit in October for a project and it wasn't approved, the likelihood of it getting approved in November, December are probably not, the likelihood is just, it's not, if it's not approved in November, it's not going to be in November and December. It would only be if you're proposing a new project, a different project. So that's what I would answer that. Can we use funding on expenses from before December notification to reimburse ourselves? Can you use funding? The answer is going to be, I'm going to say yes. I just need to I need to get clarification from IDHS as well on how far back could you charge against your grant. So you could reimburse yourselves as long as it's connected to the project. So I will get clarification on what that date is, and we'll put that in the Q&A as well, for your knowledge. So the answer is yeah, I'm maybe. I'm veering more towards a yes, but more of a strong maybe right now because I need clarification. Again, as long as it's connected to your project. So I will get clarification on that, and then we can we'll put that in the Q&A so that everybody has access to that information. Alexandra, sorry. Yeah, I can read out the question. My apologies. The questions are, if you open the Q&A, button, you should all be able to see that the questions are there. So sorry, I'll read out the questions. The next question, there's a question, can an organization with multiple programs that align to the priorities apply for each program or only once? I would say, Clarissa, I would say if your organization has multiple programs that align for the different priorities, I would still encourage you. Yeah, you can only apply once, and this might be one of those case by case scenario where we might just need to connect on a little bit about on your project. What is the start date of the grant? That's the start date of the grant will determine how far back you can charge against the grant. So I will clarify that for you, because if we're saying organizations, the start date could either be the date that we notify you that you've been awarded the grant, or it might be December. So let me just get clarification on when the start date of your grant can be, because that'll help determine how far back you can charge against it. So I will get that information, that clarification. It says another question, just to clarify, if awarded, this is a lump sum disbursement, not a draw, you're not drawing down on the fund. Correct. If you just example, if you apply for 30 in October and we approve you for funding, we recommend you for funding and it's approved, then yes, you would get the full $30,000 upfront, correct? There's another question, if multiple organizations that decide to apply together, do they all need to be GATA certified, or is only one fine? Only one. And this is a perfect example of, there's organizations that maybe want to apply for funding but are not GATA certified. But if they find one organization in their network that organization that is GATA certified would technically be the applicant. So yes, only one needs to be GATA certified, not all of them. So the one submitting the application has to be. Are there more questions in the chat? And then I'm putting in the chat. No, that's the email. If you have any additional questions after after this info session, we will, you can email me at that email address and I will answer your questions. How are you identifying intermediaries? That's a really good question. So we are the intermediaries throughout the state that we are identifying in each of the regions. For starters, they need to have experience in dispersing grants, right? So we want them to have experience doing that, and they have to have they have to have enough network reach in that respective region in order to help us distribute and distribute funding to as many organizations as possible in those respective regions. So those are the two main. So just to give you a sense, the majority of organizations that we are talking to serve as intermediaries are foundations, right? They are like the local community foundation of that respective region. So those are the mainly who we're speaking with. There's a question from Allison. Do you have a sense of how many awards will be funded in Chicago versus other regions in the state? So because this is a statewide initiative, we wanted to make sure that we distribute and allocate, funding and equitably throughout the state. So we worked with IDHS to create funding allocations per region that's based on population, that's based on unemployment, I believe, and like poverty rates, just to ensure that we have pools of funding per region, so that, as an example, not that this would happen, but we didn't want all the funding to go to Chicago, right? So there is an equitable distribution of funding per region. So that's how we're ensuring that not all funding goes to Chicago. There's a question from some, can you explain again what we do in regions 3 and 4? Do we just apply or wait? Also, can we just propose educational workshops for community members? So to answer your questions about regions 3 and 4, if you are ready, if you're GATA certified, you're in regions 3 or 4, and you're ready to apply for funding now, you can go ahead and apply directly to Field Foundation for funding. If you're ready now. If you want to wait to apply for funding through the intermediary, it is up to you. It is up to you to their process is going to be very similar. The funding ranges for the intermediaries are going to be the same. So there's not going to be less funding in some of the other regions. The cap is 30,000 per the regions as well. So it's up to you in terms of like what your timeline looks like. Can you just propose? And then the second question is, can we just propose educational workshops for community members? Absolutely. Yes, the educational workshops and increasing knowledge and tools, as mentioned earlier, can be internal to your staff and board and volunteers, or external for the community, for your stakeholders. So yes, you can do that. In the application, if we check no for a question, is this a collaborative project? Can we just put NA into the into the partnership question? I'm asking because the partnership question is marked as required within the application. Thank you. Yes, go check no and then put NA. And if that's not working, I'm making a note of that. So then I will talk to my colleague at Field Foundation, who's the grants manager, and we will rectify that. So thank you for elevating that, Lily. Can we find a map that would help show the 5 regions? Yes, and next time I'll have it on the slides. I will a team of someone from the team can drop the link on the chat so that people can see what the regional map. I would appreciate it. Can a public school within a district apply, or does it have to be through the district? I don't believe it has to be through the district. The public school can apply directly for funding. It does not have to be through the school district. As long as the school is GATA certified, as long as the GATA certification piece still has to be there. So if the school itself is not, then maybe you would need to go through the school district. But I can get confirmation on that too. We haven't I can get clarification on that, because 3 years ago we didn't get schools applying directly. We mostly had like colleges, as an example, that did apply. Like some of the city colleges applied, but I don't remember getting a specific school. So we can get clarification on that. what is the most that partners can apply for if they apply together? We didn't set a cap for that. So it's on a case by case basis. So that's why I encourage you, if you are thinking about applying as a collaborative project, that you email me directly at healingillinois@fieldfoundation.org, and we'll schedule some time to talk. Will art-based projects be considered as equally important as any project? Absolutely, they will. Absolutely. I mean, I think as long as it fits within the funding priorities, it fits within the intended outcomes that we want to see for Healing Illinois, any project would be given the same importance, right? As long as the outcome, as long as your project still advances these intended outcomes of building knowledge and understanding of racial healing, of strengthening trust and relationship buildings among residents, yeah, absolutely, would be given the same level of importance. Is it better to apply as a coalition of 3 orgs for 90K or as each for 30? Are all GATA certified? That's a good question. It's hard for me to say because I don't know what the project is, right? Like I don't, if you decide to apply as a coalition for 3 organizations at 90K, you know, why you're all applying as a coalition, you know, there has to be a story there. Like, what are you collectively advancing and how are you actually collaborating with each other beyond you just applying together, right? Like there has to be like, is it a shared programming? Is it a shared audience? Like what is it that you are providing, right? So when we think about collaborative projects, we are not just thinking of it's 5 or 10 as an example, right? It's 5 or 10 organizations that decided to apply together, but the only collaboration that's happening is that they apply together, but each individual organization is going to execute on their own programming. That is not the type of collaboration that we're looking for, right? There might be organizations in a specific neighborhood, as an example, or in a specific suburb or area that maybe, you know, want to collaborate together on some collective programming to reach as, you know, to bring their own audiences and their own stakeholders together, right? To build trust, to build knowledge, to maybe provide a workshop, to maybe provide show a documentary, and part of that documentary is that they have a conversation about, you know, just that there's a wide array of what that collaboration and project can look like. So it depends. It's not a matter of are our odds higher if we apply individually versus together. It just depends on the project. Can we, there's a question about, can we give a stipend or gift card to clients who participate? It's again under the, is it reasonable and necessary for you to execute your project and for you to see the intended outcomes of your project to be able to provide, you know, that stipend or gift card. We will provide, like I said, I will add the, you know, what are eligible and ineligible costs. And I'm pretty sure that there's something about stipend and gift cards. So be on the lookout for that. We'll put it in the Q&A section of the website. Yes, I know. And yes, I know that reasonable and necessary. There's the comment that reasonable and necessary is subjective. Could we please provide some parameters if possible? Yes, some parameters will be provided, but the majority it still falls under that category of what's reasonable and necessary. Reasonable and necessary is defined by the state. So we do have some language and we'll put it on the website for everyone to review. And there is some parameters within what's eligible and not eligible. So we'll add that to the website. The other thing that I will add, another reason why I didn't talk about it because we don't have a date yet. So we will be providing a technical assistance session to Healing Illinois applicants. We will provide this TA session for every region. For Region 1, which covers Chicago and Cook County, Regions 2, 3, 4, and 5. That technical assistance session is designed to help organizations with their projects, right? There might be some organizations that they've been doing this type of work and they know that they're ready. They've been doing this work, they're ready for funding. They don't need any support, any technical support on submitting their proposals. There might be some others where like this is kind of new for us, right? We probably fall under the readiness category, right? Where this would be a new topic or area for us to explore. I maybe have an idea, but I'm not sure. So we will be providing a technical assistance session for grant applicants that need a little bit of more support in putting their projects together, their ideas together. We are looking at, and again, I understand that the first review deadline is October 20th, but the technical assistance session will be provided before the next November deadline. And again, of course, once the intermediaries are in place, we will be scheduling those TA sessions with them as well. Just know, like I said, they're in a little bit of a different timeline, but not too far away from our deadline. So just be on the lookout for that information as well. We have, all your emails, everyone that, registered for this info session. So as soon as we have a date identified, we will share that date with all of you. And it is on a first come, first basis type of scenario, because we don't have, our timeline is also tight, and we want to make sure we get information to you and make sure you have enough time to submit your proposals to us as well. But just be on the lookout for that. Are past grant applicants eligible to apply? There's a question on the chat. Are past grant applicants eligible to apply this year? Yes. Yes, you are. You are definitely eligible to apply for funding this year. And we encourage that, especially if it's a continuation of your work of what you proposed a couple of years ago. You're picking up where the work was left off. We definitely do encourage that. Yes. I'm sorry. So there's a question from Brad. So I heard October 20th was important, but then my internet cut out. Is that when the cycle ends? No. So for Healing Illinois, we will be accepting applications on a rolling basis through December 1st. We have a handful of review cycles, so that gives us some breathing room, right? So our first upcoming review deadline is October 20th. So any applications that have been submitted in the portal for review, we'll review the first batch on October 20th. And then the next one is in November. The next one is November 10th. And then obviously the last review cycle is December 1st. So the ultimate deadline to submit for funding as part of Healing Illinois is December 1st. And I will also clarify the ultimate deadline to apply directly to Field Foundation, because as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of identifying intermediaries. Intermediaries will have a little bit of a different cycle, a timeline per se, but not too far off, because even with the intermediaries, funds still have to be expended by June 30th of 2024. So again, intermediaries are in a little bit of a different timeline, but if you're applying directly through Field Foundation, our ultimate deadline is December 1st. Is there a difference between applying directly to the grant if you're GATA certified or applying with an outside agency? Does the outside agency receive a part of your funding for admin fees? They can account for it. The organization, that is applying for it, can add admin costs for it. Yes. I'll provide clarification on what the cap is. And what the cap is for those admin costs. There's a question about who is the actual funder. Is it Field Foundation or IDHS? This would be for accounting. Also, can we use our negotiated federal indirect cost rate? So the funder in this case is Field Foundation. because you will be receiving the grant agreement from Field Foundation, and the agreement will be between the organization and Field. So Field Foundation is the actual funder. Can we use our negotiated federal? Let me get clarification on that. I don't want to say yes. On that, there's a question of can we use our negotiated federal indirect cost rate? I don't want to say yes and then have to then say no. So let me get clarification on that. So I have a question on this funding, if it can be used for immigrant crisis. I work near the police station. I know that resources we can provide is very limited. Hi Maria. You can use the funding as long as it falls, as long as it's in alignment with our funding priorities. So any proposal that is submitted has to fall under this under these funding priorities. You cannot use funding, for example, for housing or for food, like that would not be eligible, right? So it has to be a project that falls under these funding categories, funding priorities, excuse me. The funder, so sorry, I see a question. If the funder is IDHS, is indirect capped at 10%. So the funder is not, so IDHS funded, Field Foundation applied to receive the 5 million award from IDHS. So the funding is coming from IDHS, but the funding was given to Field Foundation, and now Field Foundation is redistributing funding throughout the state. So in your case, your funder is Field Foundation. Our funder for Field Foundation is IDHS. So I in the chat, I did receive confirmation that to a question that was made earlier about the indirect negotiated rate. Yes, you can use your negotiated federal indirect cost rate for admin cost. So I just received confirmation that yes, you can use that. And we will still add this answer to the chat. There's a question. So if we use the search registered grantees on the CFSA website and our org doesn't come up, then we aren't GETA registered. That would be correct. If you're GETA registered, then it would show up in the system. And you'll know if you're GETA certified, because it is a process that you have to go through to become certified. But you are correct. If your organization is not showing up, then that means you are not. The following question to that, does your GATA certification expire? It does. So maybe you were registered at one point and it wasn't renewed or it wasn't. So yes, it can expire. There's another question in the chat. If you do not have a negotiated cost rate, is there an indirect rate that we should be using? I will get confirmation of that. I don't want to give you a rate and let it be the wrong rate. So let me get confirmation on that, and then we'll put that what that rate is on the Q&A of the Healing Illinois website. Yes, there's a question about, will this presentation be available after the Zoom? Yes, we will share this this information. We will share the slide deck. Yes, I'll add some more information just based on questions that you all had. I will add a little bit more information to it so that it is useful for you. There's a question, if GATA certification has expired, how long does it take to renew? And can you still apply as a certified applicant while the renewal is in process? Well, if your certification expired, you're not GATA certified. In this case, so you're not a certified applicant in that case because your certification expired. I don't know how long it takes. So like I said, it might take a month, it could take 2 months. I'm not sure. I we we can try. I can try and see if we can get an answer about just from beginning to end, or even if it's a renewal, does a renewal timeline look different than from an organization that's applying, just totally as a new GATA certified organization? So we can get clarification on that, and we can add it to we can add that to our to the Q&A on the website, because I'm not sure. I don't want to give you wrong information or mislead you. There's another question about, will the provider that receives funding through your agency have to provide quarterly reports to your agency? What is that process? There will be a final report. There will be a final report that you will provide to us. But the Field Foundation will be conducting random expenditure testing. What does that mean? That means that we will do, for lack of a better word, desk audits, just to ensure that organizations are spending the money as they said, as they've intended, and they're spending it as they say they would. And this is a way also that helps us get a sense of, okay, organization, we've just based on the expenditure testing that we've been doing over the course of time period, it gives us a sense whether organizations will be able to spend down the money by June 30th. So we'll be doing that, but you just have to submit a final report. There's no quarterly reports tied to this. And that, just to give you a sense, the expenditure testing will probably take place between like between February and March. And that information, of course, would be in your grant agreement. Were there any other questions? Nice. Yeah, thank you so much to everyone. And again, the first info session is always very helpful because you all have amazing questions that will help, make the next one a little bit more informative. But all of the questions that you provided, we will put on the Q&A on the Healing Illinois website. And again, as the team put on the chat, if you have any questions, please email us at healingillinois@fieldfoundation.org. And I'm the one that gets those emails. So just know that we'll be responding. There's a human behind it. I'll be responding to your questions. And also be on the lookout. Like I said, we have all your emails. So as soon as we schedule the TA session, we'll share that information in case you want that added support in putting your proposals together. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. When there's a question from Mary, when is the first cycle of application closes? So it's all one cycle. So the ultimate deadline is December 1st, but the first review, our first review deadline is October 20th. So if there's, I'm just making it up, if there's 20 applications right now in the portal that have been submitted, then if by the 20th there's still, there's only 20, we'll review that first batch on the 20th, and we'll notify you within 10 days whether you've been approved for funding. It'll just helps alleviate for us. It helps you, right? The sooner we inform you that you've been approved for funding, that you can go ahead and begin your work and begin planning. So that is why we created these review deadlines, to be able to inform you sooner rather than later whether you've been approved for funding. So yeah, so those are just internal review deadlines for us, but we wanted to be transparent about those with you. But the ultimate deadline for funding is December 1st. Hi, Maria, can you clarify your question? Because I don't understand, sorry. No, it's okay. It's okay. I just want to make sure I understand so that I can answer, so that it's helpful to you. Why was this project created? That's a really good question. I believe we have some of the history on the website. So this really came about 3 years ago at the onset of the pandemic, right? This was post George Floyd murder, all the social uprisings of almost about 3 years ago, and the state wanted to do something about it. Our Governor Pritzker, wanted to put resources behind, this something of the likeness of this project, right? To provide healing, to provide resources for Illinoisans to, come together and heal collectively, to build relationships, to better understand each other, to be more empathetic of each other. And that's how that came about. But that was about 3 years ago. And then there was a pause because there were, other priorities at the time. And then here we are today with a renewed commitment from IDHS and the state to put forth this funding. So hopefully that's helpful, and we can, that's another thing. Yeah, I can add this to the next info session, just give a little bit about, share a little bit more information about just the history of Healing Illinois. So thank you, Maria, for that. Are there any other questions? Any other questions from the folks that are still on the call? We're going to stay on the call till 12:15. If you have any additional questions, you have questions specific maybe to your project, I'm happy to answer that since we're a much smaller group. It's easier to manage. maybe have that are happy to answer those questions. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, we're excited. We're excited about the initiative too. And we're definitely very excited to see like the projects that all of you are going to put together and just to see them realized too. So we're very excited about it too. Thank you, Daryl. I don't know if you're still in the room, but thank you. Hi, Maria. I see your question. Can education and training work be internal with staff or should it be external? It can be either or. So if you want to provide some training and workshops internally to your staff and board